Today, do Sims have lives when you're not watching? They do now. This is CheckPoint. Welcome to CheckPoint, where for the first time in ages, I've been playing a video game for myself and not for content.
How do you have the time for that?
I just juggled some stuff around.
You finish that script we need next week?
Do not question the process.
Do you have those graphics I asked for?
I'm feeling very attacked. Remember when I talked about Dr. Disrespect's video game company and admitted that I went into that story expecting a bunch of nonsense, but came away actually feeling like at least one or two people working there might know what they're doing, but I was still called bitter and jealous by the doc's very chill and well-adjusted fans? Great news, it's nonsense again. In a blog post that blurs the lines between fans of Midnight Society the company and players within Midnight Society the game, studio head Robert Bowling explains that anybody who is part of that Day Zero community we reported previously on is one of the Claws. But through the purchase of a $50 access pass, also known as the Founders Pass, they become a variant, which allows them perks, such as early access to gameplay builds, first dibs on exclusive merchandise, a procedurally generated but totally unique 1 of 10,000 cosmetic avatar called a Visor Cortex, and even voting rights on where development focuses its resources in terms of in-game features. A game, to be clear, that we still have no information on beyond multiplayer shooter. So, as an update to our previous story where we questioned Midnight Society's plan to use unpaid QA testers, in fact, you have to pay to be a QA tester. Even some of Dr. Disrespect's fans have recoiled slightly that the company's first big announcement has more to do with monetization than gameplay, but maybe some of that is because this announcement is also just very dense, with a lot of odd little details. Remember that a Founders Pass makes a claw into a variant, but later some variants will have a chance to get an industry pass and join the Eyes, who build weapons within the game's universe and can seemingly make money off of that. In the FAQ, Bowling says, quote, "We are in the process of designing a meta-economy layer for Midnight Society that will form the core of industry pass holders." Did I mention these Founders Passes are NFTs? I feel you could have guessed that by now, but yeah, they're NFTs. There's only 10,000 of them available, which I feel is optimistic, but they sure don't, because you first have to be approved to buy one. But then the main approval metric seems to be if you joined the website back in December, so it's not exactly the Freemasons. Anyway, while you won't be able to put your Visor Cortex to any commercial use, because of course the Midnight Society still owns all the intellectual property, since it's an NFT, you will be able to sell your Founders Pass in its entirety, presumably to one of the 12 people using Ubisoft Quartz.
If you're like me, you remember Reggie Fils-Aimé, which by that criteria means you're all like me, and so don't forget to moisturize. Reggie was at South by Southwest last weekend to share his thoughts on the entertainment industry, and he covered a lot of ground. But what's getting the most attention are his thoughts not on Nintendo, but on GameStop. As you'll recall, Reggie decided to spend his pandemic the way the rest of us did, concentrating on video games. Except he did it by joining GameStop's board of directors in hopes of steering the company towards, let's say, relevance? Sure. We've covered this previously on CheckPoint, and man, was Reggie positive about what he had hoped. Apart from his time spent on the corporate governance committee, he and other board members also want to help GameStop pivot their strategy into e-commerce, for which his participation was rebuffed. And when asked about the company's strategy now, he still managed to play it, let's say, politely? Sure. Quote, "There has not been an articulated strategy. Leadership says we don't want to articulate our strategy because they don't want it to be stolen. To me, that was not acceptable. It's not the secret to Cold Fusion, guys. It's a fucking business model, and Reggie just wanted you to figure one out." He's never come out and said definitively why he left the board, but I can't think of any other reason that must sum up his experience better than that quote. But hey, it is only the departure of one major industry luminary from the board of a company that he dearly wanted to save. I'm sure GameStop will eventually articulate that fabled business model that will treat its core constituents with, let's say, respect? Sure.
Time for another installment of Reading the Patch Notes, the recurring segment where we read out patch notes because they're often hilarious out of context. Today's game, Domina, a Roman gladiator management sim. 1. Ministrator might not buy water or wine even when it's available in the market. Presumably the ministrators were getting too drunk and or hydrated. 2. Charioteer stops whipping horse during second race. This one just says fixed, so I'm not sure if they're supposed to stop and weren't or aren't supposed to stop and were, but suffice to say, the whipping is now operating as intended. 3. Take off the fucking masks. Next time you're at the grocery store, try showing a woman your face. Be confident, unafraid of the lies. You might get a girlfriend. Women like confidence. Women don't like dudes who cover their faces in fear. What are you afraid of? Getting laid? Grow up. And they've optimized the particle effects. Obviously, this went, shall we say, poorly for the developer, who had a good laugh on Twitter about the woke mob and so forth. But rather than get into repeating the verifiable science of masks, I'll just say, don't take advice from someone who thinks you should pick up women at the grocery store.
Guess what, Sims fans? Maxis is bringing even more verisimilitude to neighborhood stories by giving all of your neighbors free will. And you know what that means. Hundreds of terrifying and confounding new ways to die, all dependent on the traits of those involved. How old they are, how hot they are, how stupid they are. Now, your next door neighbor can just decide to adopt a bunch of kids who will light their house on fire, and yours, while learning to cook. Households can decide to move into and out of lots, meaning you'll never know exactly why that shifty-looking dude moved in, did a bunch of late-night gardening, and then suddenly moved away 3 months later, but you'll have your suspicions. Whatever you do, don't fixate on the ontological nightmare of Sims 4 giving free will to virtual beings that only exist as long as you have the game running, and what it would mean to live with the knowledge that your existence could just as easily be paused or scrubbed entirely clean without a second thought by the capricious god being that only has time to let your lives play out when there's nothing good on Netflix. Instead, focus on this. You can toggle these features on and off at will. How does that make you feel about your place in an uncaring universe? Hop into the comments below and scream into the void. And don't forget to check out our Discord.
And now for more Reading the Patch Notes, the recurring segment where I ask From Software why they're nerfing literally the only 3 Ashes of War I use and not the busted ones.
Because Miyazaki watches only you play Elden Ring and wanted to hurt only you specifically.
I mean, apart from the obvious.
Coming up, Tom Clancy's X-Defiant is now just X-Defiant. Maybe that's because they will be incorporating characters from other franchises into the game's so-called fast-paced firefights meets punk rock mosh pit, or maybe it's because they finally lifted the curse that forces Tom Clancy's soul to wander the earth and be branded onto every game Ubisoft makes.
Every time I heard you read through the Sims story, when it's like, they've now added free will, and I'm like, Will Wright? Creator of The Sims? Everyone now gets a free will right. Sorry. I didn't want to risk squeaking the chair during the silence at the end
That makes sense.
At the end of Beej's bit. You would not have had reason or desire or opportunity to read the whole post on Midnight Society, would you?
No.
It's just so, I mean, I said in the thing, it's very dense.
Right.
With like details of like what we were saying. It's like you know, like young teenagers being like, oh, okay, we'll be codenamed the Claws, but then some Claws can become a variant.
Oh, that's awesome! I want to be a variant. It's like cool.
Okay, well then I'll become one of the eyes, and I get to make the guns.
Well, then how do you get to be one of the eyes? It's like, well, you got to be a claw first, but okay, we'll say that you have to be a variant after becoming a claw, but then if you go through the ritual, then you can become one of the eyes. Oh. That's so cool.
Yeah. I don't know. It's just
replete with teenage energy.
Yeah. And it's the criteria to get approved is like, number 1 is like if you joined up back in December when the website launched. 2 is if you've been active since then. Number 3 is like how much of a gamer or creator you are. And then number 4 is like what your opinions are on what variants should get to do.
Now, you brought up the Freemasons.
Yes.
Okay, so when I joined the Freemasons,
Yeah.
I had to provide references.
Yeah, he's not in the Masons anymore.
I'm not. That's just because I don't live in the same city, and I can't go see my mother lodge, so I didn't want to go see any lodge because I'm stubborn. Anyway,
No.
but you have to provide references because they are like, we just want to see who you are and ask some people about you and
Right.
stuff and kind of evaluate you, and then we'll have a chance to tender a report, and then everyone gets to vote on whether you get to join or not, that kind of thing. But you have to ask in the first place to join. And what gets me about this is like when you say how much of a gamer or creator you are, and I'm like, does that mean that if you want to move up in the Midnight Society, that you have to provide reference to, here's mods I've been making, here's my Xbox gamer score, like
In the FAQ, the application to be approved to buy this $50 NFT Founders Pass.
right?
The FAQ says that there is an application. You don't have to fill it out, but you can. And on the application, you can link to like your social media pages or anything else that will, it's like any information you can give us will better inform our choices of who we approve.
Okay, they are trying to structure it like a secret society would.
Yeah.
Right, but ultimately, there's 10,000 open slots, and if you're a Dr. Disrespect fan, you'll probably maybe just get in.
I have to assume that that's the case.
It's funny, too, because if it's all NFTs, right, and they're like, well, we're going to approve who gets to buy one. I'm like, oh, that seems like a good way of I guess, providing a very wide market.
It's also, brief aside, the Visor Cortex thing, randomly generated, right? They're all unique, but they're procedurally or randomly generated.
They're Bored Apes, yeah.
But there are some features that have rarity associated. So like you could randomly get a shitty one, I guess.
Yes, actually, it's a good point. Like, don't say you could randomly get a legendary. It's like you will randomly get a shitty one.
Probably.
One that nobody else wants.
Yeah.
But it's funny because it's like, okay, well, if I want to ensure that I have a wide amount of people that all have an opportunity to participate in this thing and we can hear a lot of voices, this seems like not a bad way to say, let's get 10,000 unique individuals who are going to be involved with being the initial cheerleading voice of our company and who want to be involved in doing whatever. However, once you've purchased that NFT, hey, they're decentralized. You should be able to sell them to whoever you want. What's to stop somebody from being like, I will buy up 8,000 of these 10,000 NFTs from all these people.
Yeah,
and
so-
being like, now I have 8,000 votes in how these things go in the company.
Because so in the FAQ they say that each person can only buy one Founders Pass.
Oh, I see.
But
So it is
after
highly regulated.
But they after the fact,
Yeah.
I guess you could.
Yeah.
Right? If people start then afterwards putting them up, then I suppose one person could buy more than one.
How about that?
I guess.
Yeah.
There's a lot of weird things. This seems like a very, very obtuse way to get $500,000 in startup funds.
Yeah, why not just do a Kickstarter?
That seems a lot easier, actually. Yeah.
I guess.
Oh, well.
We should do
Anything
something
else?
like this for Corpline.
Ooh. The secret pipesman.
Right, yeah. Right? We have our own secret society already. We can make it even more convoluted.
Oh, yeah. I'm sure I'd have to refer to our notes, but I
Yeah.
know that we've mentioned weird ranks and stuff in the secret pipesman over the years. Ooh, I like it. No NFTs, though.
No. He did it by joining GameStop's board of directors in Horps.
I had such high horps, Beach. Such high horps
I gotta
for
get
this
off,
story.
I should just get off my high Horps and do it properly.
Your horps is so tall. You have to stand on the soapbox to get on top of your high horps. Yeah.